Oh yeah, I can.
Okay, the webinar is now live.
Welcome to the Environmental Quality Commission's January 20th meeting. My name is Ryan Price and I'm the chair of the EQC. This meeting is a teleconference meeting with members of the EQC, city staff, and members of the public participating remotely to ensure proper social distancing in this federal, state, and local emergency. We will start with roll call. So first, I would like to ask the staff members present to introduce themselves.
Good evening. I'm Rebecca Lucky, Sustainability Manager with the City of Menlo Park.
Thank you, Ms. Lucky. And next, I would like to ask the commissioners to introduce themselves, starting with Commissioner Elkins.
I am Commissioner Leah Elkins.
Janelle London.
Deb Martin.
Josie Gaylord.
Tom Cabot.
Thank you. And I believe Commissioner Payne is not here today. Is that correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, perfect. So we have one commissioner who is not able to make it today. Rebecca, could you please provide instructions to both the EQC members and members of the public on how the meeting will proceed?
Thank you, Chair Price. Welcome to the Environmental Quality Commission on January 20th. It's our regular meeting. And at this time, we ask the EQC members to please keep their cameras on and mute yourself when you're not speaking and unmute when you are speaking. And staff will engage webcams and microphones to make presentations to the EQC or to respond to questions. And for members of the public who are in attendance and wish to provide public comment on agenda items or general public at the beginning of the meeting, you can raise your hand once the chair calls for public comment. It's typically right next to your name in the attendee list, and I will be able to unmute your microphone so that you'll be able to speak up to 3 minutes. And with that, I return the meeting to the chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Rebecca. Now we're at the point in the meeting where we can take public comment. For these public comments, the public may address the EQC on any subject that is not listed on the agenda. Each speaker may address the EQC once under public comment for a limit of 3 minutes. And following the process that Ms. Lucky indicated. The EQC cannot act on items not listed on the agenda. Therefore, EQC members cannot respond to non-agenda issues brought up under public comment other than to provide general information. The floor is now open for public comment. Rebecca, do we have any public comment?
Again, for those who are in attendance, if you'd like to make public comment on an item that is not on the agenda to the EQC, please use the raise hand feature that's next to your name on the attendees list. And with that, I do have one public comment from Mr. Peter Edmonds. I have unmuted your microphone, Mr. Edmonds. You should be able to speak now.
Good evening, Chair Price and commissioners. For the record, I'm Peter Edmonds, a resident of Menlo Park District 3. So, happy new government. Out of the many virtues that were invoked today in speeches, I'd like to pick two for immediate application. Those are honesty and humility. I sent many of you an inadequately fact-checked email on Monday evening alleging that the City Arborist's annual report was missing from tonight's agenda. I was wrong, as Vice Mayor Nash promptly pointed out to me. I followed up on Tuesday with an apology, and I'm apologizing in person now. In explanation, I was looking for an item that clearly described the city arborist's annual report, and I overlooked it under the camouflage of information on an urban forest on the last line of a page that I skip because it consists of the introductory information that I've read so many times before. So this explanation is not an excuse, it's something to keep in mind. Contrary to common behavior, I'm not seeking to blame another person or to point a finger. The mistake was all mine. On another topic, I'm wondering if you have noticed that when you had a vacancy to fill in the EQC because of the resignation of Rebecca Turley, there were 7 candidates, none of whom was a member of the prior task force on the revision of the Heritage Tree Ordinance. I think that should tell you something. Furthermore, you've got 6 unappointed candidates out here who are interested in contributing to the work of the commission. And I'm hoping that you are keeping that in mind and have some roles for those 6 candidates. I was also going to point out, if I had time, that there was a posting on Nextdoor yesterday by a resident who was reminding neighbors that the municipal code prohibits contract work on weekends.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonds.
I'll follow up on that during a later period.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other public comments, Rebecca?
Thank you, Commissioner Price. I do believe there is a member of the public that's trying to log in, but is having some technical difficulties. So
Okay.
I'm not sure what you'd like to do, maybe to make some space in the meeting if they're able to log back, if they're able to log in, then they can make the comments, the public comments later in the meeting.
That makes sense. I think given the nature of the situation and the technical difficulty, perhaps we can allow them to make their public comment after we, even if we hear from Christian, we could return to the public comment for that person if they're able to log back in. And if they're not, then we could direct them to send an email message perhaps with their comment.
Thank you.
You're
and with
welcome.
that, I don't see any other hands raised at this time.
Okay, so we'll return to the individual who mentioned to Rebecca that she was trying to log in. And at this time, we'll move to regular business, knowing we'll have that one public comment in the future. Under public comment, or sorry, under regular business, excuse me, the EQC considers providing advice to City Council on sustainability policy matters or administrative actions that require City Council decision. The first item under regular business is item D1, review and receive information regarding the state of the urban forest. At this time, we are going to hear this item as presented by Christian Bonner, the city arborist for the city of Menlo Park. So I would like to introduce Christian.
Good evening. Happy to join you. Please let me know if you cannot hear me. And can you please, thank you. Can you please make me the presenter so that I can share my screen with you? I just have a short PowerPoint presentation to run through.
Hi, Mr. Bonner. Yes, you should be able to share your screen. Let me know if you can't. There's a, probably like at the bottom of the screen where it says share screen. You should be able to click on that.
Thank you. All right. I'm sorry, members of the council, are you able to see the presentation view?
Yes.
Yes.
We can see.
Okay. So I'll just jump right into it. So thank you very much for allowing me to join you. It's nice to see you all here remotely. I think it's the first time I've joined the EQC meeting in this format. So I appreciate you providing me the opportunity. Historically, the city arborist has just provided an annual update to the EQC in terms of the state of the urban forest, what's going on currently with maintenance operations, the administration of the heritage tree ordinance, personnel, and the like. So for the purposes of this presentation, this will cover the calendar year of 2020, which is just a little bit different than we've done it in the past. Historically, it's been the fiscal year where we typically track the data. But the timing was good for this particular meeting to capture the whole year of 2020, which I know was a interesting one for all of us. The trees section was included in that. So again, just a quick breakdown of the urban forest overview. This is just a quick breakdown of all the trees that we have in the city, and these are limited to publicly maintained trees. As many of you likely know, the publicly maintained component of the urban forest is a relatively small percentage of the total urban forest when you consider canopy cover. The majority of the urban forest canopy cover actually resides on private property. However, this is the data that we have, and it's pretty accurate data. It's a complete inventory of all of the city maintained street trees and park trees. And there are some trees that are in public facilities such as City Hall. So that's just kind of background of the data that I'm going to cover here. Roughly 19,000 total trees. This is a breakdown of the most commonly occurring tree species in the inventory currently, and estimated value associated with those trees. So about 19,000 trees, 67.5 million is the estimated value. That value is a simplification of the appraised value that the city uses to evaluate heritage trees. So it's just kind of a simplified version of that. It's actually more in line with the current appraised value, which is less subjective. If there's any specific questions about that, I'm happy to answer them. But what's of note here, nothing really significant has changed, I think, since I last updated the commission, although I know that there's some new commissioners. So feel free to let me know if there's any questions about any of this information. But what is of note here, really what we're looking at is the breakdown of the species and what the relative percentage of each species is. As you may have seen in my memo, there's just kind of a standard that we try to adhere to or achieve in terms of the species composition. In general, the more diverse the species composition, the more healthy the urban forest is considered, the more resilient it is to change, infection from pests and diseases, climate change. The more diverse the species, the more resilient the overall urban forest canopy is considered. So overall, Menlo Park is pretty good. There's one notable exception that I've spoken to in the past. That's remained relatively unchanged. It's decreasing incrementally, and that's intended. And that is the percentage of coast live oak. It just kind of exceeds the threshold that we try to achieve without with maintaining less than 10% of any one particular botanical tree species. And again, that's that goal is to increase the resiliency of the urban forest to significant loss if there is the introduction of a exotic disease or a new disease such as sudden oak death, which is currently not a problem in the Menlo Park, not a significant problem. But another example may be significant climate change, and kind of time will tell how resilient coast live oak in particular is to extreme temperatures. But it's just something that it's important to identify that we've exceeded that threshold, and we're working toward decreasing the total percentage of coast live oak. And then the breakdown of all the other species falls far below that threshold. The next most commonly occurring tree species is everybody's favorite street tree, the liquid amber. Although it's far from the perfect street tree, as it is a high maintenance tree. It has aggressive root structure. It's relatively messy in terms of the fruit, which are the spiny balls, which I imagine most are familiar with. Their susceptibility to sudden limb drop, or otherwise known as failure of limbs that are otherwise structurally sound, often in high temperature conditions. So all those factors make this tree a less than ideal street tree candidate. And there's a significant number of them in Menlo Park, and the majority of them are mature trees. And we'll talk about that a little bit further. So although it's a tree species that's not without its challenges, it's also a significant contributor to the ecosystem services that the urban forest provides, in that these are large canopy trees, which have been conclusively shown to provide significantly greater benefits than either young trees or small canopy trees, or ornamental trees that don't grow to have a large canopy. And then just kind of running down the list, London plane tree, the desert gum, which is a eucalyptus species, is a little bit of an outlier. Many may be surprised or scratch their head at this because you probably don't see a lot of eucalyptus street trees, and there are not in Menlo Park. The reason this exists is in Bayfront Park. That is the primary species component out there, are this relatively small canopy eucalyptus tree. And it was planted out there when the site was developed as a park. The other ones, as is the narrow-leafed gum, which is further down the list. And the rest of them on there are kind of the usual suspects with street trees. Again, I'm happy to answer any questions about any of these. But I'm going to move on to the next component, which is just evaluating the distribution of size and age from the tree inventory data that we have. And similar to the tree species distribution, a diversity of distribution of size and age is also considered more sustainable, in that you don't have what's considered a monoculture or even aged, not a monoculture, an even age stand of trees, which is subject to decline in a relatively short, narrow window of time. Like all of the trees would decline at the same time because they're all of the same age, and all trees are going to decline and die at some time, regardless of how well they're maintained or how ideal the site is. I mean, that's just, the natural process as trees grow and mature and then start to over mature and decline. So what we're trying to achieve here in evaluating this is maintaining an uneven age distribution of tree age and tree size. And I'm sorry, backing up a little bit, tree size for the most part can be used as a relatively, reliable indicator of tree age. Just the bigger the tree, the older the tree is for the most part. There's some exceptions to that, and I spoke to that a little bit in the memo that I sent over, and I'm happy to answer any specific questions about that. But in general, the distribution of the size is relatively young to medium-sized trees, which is a good thing. It's an urban forest that's relatively young and is maturing. So there are a lot of ecosystem services to be provided with a developing urban forest canopy if the proper components are in place to manage those services to be optimized. And I'll talk a little bit about that in our tree maintenance program. But what is also of note here is even though there's a significant component that are small and medium size, there's also a relatively large component that are large size. And that's reflected by the in the DBH, and I'm sorry, the DBH is just abbreviation for diameter of the trunk and the height. The over 31, the 31 plus, that's 31 inches in diameter, measured at 4.5 feet above the grade. So that's a pretty significant large tree. And 675, it's a relatively small percentage of the overall canopy. But when you consider the breakdown and then also going back to the 25 and 30, I mean, those are still large trees. It's still a significant component. And it's important to acknowledge that because there are areas of the city that really do have this kind of even age distribution. And we are even currently now starting to see kind of a simultaneous decline in entire streets with mature trees that are essentially all the same age. And in many instances, they're also a monoculture. They're also the same species. And it's just an area that is important to identify. And my recommendation here is to do further analysis to develop management plans to address the long-term, well, the moderate and long-term management of these specific areas in these specific neighborhoods. You know, I know anecdotally, just as the city arborist, you know, the certain trees that, you know, fall into this category. There are likely more of them, and kind of a more thorough analysis of the data that we have at our disposal will help to guide management policies in the future, or I should say the developmental policies, hopefully, and using that as management tools to make decisions in the future to help to optimize the benefits that the urban forest can provide and to minimize this kind of simultaneous decline and encourage, you know, the restoration of the urban forest canopy, that younger component, and optimize that as best as possible. So kind of along that train of thought, the city tree maintenance program, as you may know, the city has a routine maintenance program for both street trees and park trees now. The park trees was relatively new as a program that we implemented about 4 years ago. We just break down the different maintenance areas into different maintenance zones or districts. And the objective that we have is to maintain a 5-year pruning cycle so that we're at minimum at least inspecting all of the trees on a 5-year cycle. More often than not, we're inspecting them and we're pruning them as well. And then as needed, we're identifying those that are need further evaluation to determine if removal is necessary, or if you know, a risk that's identified, if it can be mitigated with pruning or some other type of cultural practices. So here's just kind of a quick overview and a map of the different maintenance zones that we have throughout the city. Currently, I just try to make this as current as possible. The tree maintenance contractor is working in the suburban park neighborhood. This particular maintenance district that they're working on, the current work order has about 700 trees on it. That's only one component of this maintenance district. But right now they're essentially working in suburban park. And I'm sorry, backing up, the majority of the proactive maintenance that's done on street trees is done by the tree maintenance contract that the city has with West Coast arborists. And so it's a really good program in that the city has this proactive maintenance program. We also do reactive work and responding to service requests, but we do that primarily in-house. The majority of this work we farm out to West Coast arborists. We also utilize their inventory software to manage our tree inventory as well. And so that's where a lot of these images that you're looking at came from. This right now is just kind of map, just a little snapshot of that maintenance district that we're working in Suburban Park. And I broke it down, or I symbolized the trees by the size or the diameter, DBH. And you can see in the area that is just northeast of Flood Park, Suburban Park, that there's a lot of large trees there. And I apologize about the legend on the right-hand side. It is not in size order. No matter how hard I tried, I could not get the inventory software to sort that by size. So I apologize for that. But in any case, just focus on the size of the little dots. The bigger the dot, the bigger the size. You can see there's a large component of relatively large trees in the Suburban Park neighborhood. Whereas on other areas, such as on Bay Road, there's a lot of small canopy trees. Also in the industrial area that is east of Marsh Road, there's quite a few small canopy trees, which is not unusual for an industrial area, but it's also an opportunity to kind of grow the urban forest canopy. So kind of moving on and kind of taking it a step further, now evaluating the species, and this is what this is symbolized by here. And I didn't want to confuse you with the legend of the species, because there's so many that apply to this particular district that it was just kind of overwhelming. But I think you can see, especially in the Suburban Park neighborhood, again, that area that's northwest of Flood Park, that there really is a large component of the same type of species, which is also relatively large. So again, this is another example of what I brought up earlier. You have a monoculture of even-aged trees that are mature and starting to over-mature. This is an area really where it would probably be worthwhile to focus on and do additional analysis to develop management tools to try to come up with a management plan on how this will be addressed going forward. The large green squares that you see, surprise, these are liquid amber trees. These are the kind of, and they're beautiful trees. I mean, don't get me wrong. I'll go on to the next slide here. I mean, this is just a snapshot on Hedge Road. And this is not my photography prowess by any means. This is a Google image. So it really does not do it justice, but this is a significant component of the urban forest canopy. I mean, really contributes a lot. And I mean, it really takes decades. I mean, really probably estimating these trees being 60, 70 plus years old when this subdivision was developed. It really takes decades for these trees to get to this size when they're providing this level of benefits. And yes, there are maintenance needs that are associated with these, but the ecosystem services that they provide far outweigh the maintenance costs that are associated with them. Again, a little background info here with our proactive maintenance program. This is funded by the Landscape Assessment District that property owners pay into. And the amount that they pay into is relatively small. I don't know the exact amount. I'm happy to find it out for you if anybody would like to know, but I think it's approximately $80 annually to maintain these trees, on a 5-year pruning cycle. And I mean, that's just really next to nothing when you consider, paying a private tree care company with, certified arborist on staff supervising the work. I mean, it would probably be a couple $1,000s to just prune one of these trees once. So it's definitely a lot of bang for our buck. And we're able to get this competitive pricing because we're doing the work in bulk. We're not just going out and pruning one individual tree at a time. We're pruning the entire neighborhood at a time. And it's good because, one, we're able to keep the cost down, and two, we're able to do it using a systematic approach where we know that entire neighborhood is taken care of. We've monitored those trees. We've evaluated those trees. They prune the trees. When I get a call, which I often do, from neighbors in this neighborhood saying, I'm concerned about the potential risk associated with this tree on this address, I can say, well, we just evaluated that tree, or look, we have a crew in the area right now and it's going to be evaluated in the next couple of weeks. So it's a really helpful management tool. Further background info, and let me know if I'm going over time here, but we've had some budget challenges this year with the COVID crisis, and this proactive maintenance program was on the chopping block. And fortunately, we were able to preserve it, and it really wasn't cut at all. And I really think that speaks well, I think, to the priorities of the city. And it's a wise investment. It's a wise policy decision because the costs of deferred maintenance far outweigh the proactive maintenance cost of routine trimming. Again, we're able to keep the cost down because we do it in bulk. If we don't do this work proactively now, we're going to respond to each one of these individual addresses as they call up because we're not being proactive about pruning out dead wood, removing a hanging limb, whatever the case may be. And those things are going to happen because urban trees need maintenance. There's a lot more targets in the area and the risk is higher than would exist in a natural area. So these things are going to come up. These maintenance needs are going to come up. And if it's not done proactively, it's going to have to be done reactively. And the costs are significantly greater when the work is done reactively. So we made that argument to council and we made it successfully. And to their credit, council really recognized the value in doing proactive maintenance. So that's a positive aspect. We had other aspects of the program that were reduced, such as emergency tree removals, but we're able to manage that. So again, in addition to the street tree maintenance program, we also maintain park trees. As I mentioned earlier, previously, this was totally reactive. This was just done to, oh, hey, we got a hanging limb over here from a resident that calls, or the park maintenance crew says that, hey, this tree is in the process of coming down, and we would go out and respond. So about 4 years ago, we were able to update that and get the funding for a proactive maintenance program. This was an area that was actually also cut, but it was a little bit of trade-off with the street tree maintenance program. Typically, the street trees have a higher level of maintenance associated with them, simply because there's more targets in that area. There's just simply more traffic, pedestrian traffic, vehicle traffic. There's more things to hit underneath those trees. And there's more stressors that is imposed upon those trees. We have to maintain the sidewalks out there. We're constantly doing root pruning. There's trucks that are driving through there, hitting limbs. I mean, all nature of kind of urban stressors that exist for street trees that don't with park trees. So it was a trade-off, but I think an acceptable one in that, the maintenance need for street trees is not the same for park trees. Just a summary of all the parks and recreation facilities that we manage. In addition to the park maintenance work, we also do emergency response work. As I mentioned previously, this is primarily done in-house. The city has a small tree maintenance crew, 3 full-time and 1 part-time staff. And myself, I supervise that crew. But they're the crew is the one that's actually out there in the field doing the hands-on work. They do this emergency response work. And this was an image that was taken actually just yesterday from the windstorms. This was on Lexington Road. We came into work on Tuesday morning and found this tree that had failed. It was a trunk failure at about 20 feet in height, which is highly unusual. And it failed into the road. Fortunately, there was no property damage, which it's unusual that property damage occurs, but there was some damage to the utilities. We had to wait for PG&E to shut it down. As you can see their truck in the background. But this is the day-to-day work that the tree crew does, and they're kind of the unsung heroes. I mean, really, they are essential workers. I mean, they were one of the first identified as being able to go back to work when there was the initial shutdown of the city, because they're out there, maintaining the safety of these trees and the public. And I didn't have to dig very far back to find an image like this. I mean, this literally was taken just yesterday morning. So on a day-to-day basis, this is just what the tree crew is responding to. Unfortunately, in this case, probably not surprisingly, the tree required complete removal, as did the tree that was behind it. The majority of the canopy of the tree kind of landed on the street tree that was just behind it and essentially stripped all of the limbs off. So both trees had to be removed entirely. But we're already coordinating with the property owner to grind the stumps out and replant. But I think it's just a good example of, street trees, they do have to be maintained. Even with routine maintenance, we're doing the best that we can. Failure does occur. There is some risk associated with all trees. We try to maintain the trees to reduce that potential risk. So another component, kind of the fun part of tree maintenance program is the planting component. The removal, as I spoke to, I mean, there's inevitably going to be some removals that occur. There's 187 public tree removals that we had in 2020, but there's 206 trees planted. So pretty consistently, we've overplanted, and in theory, there's a net gain in the total trees that we're planting out there in the area, in the urban forest. But unfortunately, the total trees in the inventory don't reflect that. So I don't know for certain, but as I spoke to in my memo, I suspect that the likely cause of that is just unreported removals. Unreported and to a lesser degree unrecorded removals, perhaps in a severe storm event where there are several removals that are similar to the image that I just provided, and we're overwhelmed and we're just prioritizing the work that needs to be done to make it safe. In those instances, and they're relatively rare, it's possible and even likely that not all of the work will be recorded because we're just trying to get the work done and stay on top of it. So there are some instances where not all the removals are recorded, but I think probably more likely, because we are pretty good about staying on top of that, is that individual trees are being removed and not replaced, and they're unauthorized removal, essentially. So that is what I suspect is causing this gradual decline in the total number of trees that are in the tree inventory, even though we've had a net gain in theory with the total number of trees that we've planted. This is just really for the last decade. We can show that we've replanted more trees than we've removed. But nonetheless, there is this continuous decline. So another component, it's kind of a fun part of the planting program, is we partnered with Canopy, the nonprofit tree planting organization based out of Palo Alto. They primarily do their work in Palo Alto, but as many of the members of the commission know, part of the mitigation funds for the redwood removals at 1000 El Camino Real were directed toward Canopy. The property owner there was required as a condition of approval for those removal permits to make a donation to plant 62 trees, for Canopy to plant 62 trees, and the donation for the funds, a healthy amount per tree, was provided to Canopy. And so kind of our initial stab at this, and there's definitely been some challenges in 2020. Canopy operates as a volunteer organization that plants trees primarily with a model of volunteer group plantings, assembling large groups of volunteers to come out and plant trees. And really the health restrictions that we've had in 2020 have really limited Canopy's capacity to do that. But we did start on it this year in December. An initial planting was done. Just over a baker's dozen of trees were planted on Pierce Road over in the Bellhaven neighborhood, and a component of the mitigation funds were earmarked for the Bellhaven neighborhood. And it was originally kind of identified as a component of a sidewalk improvement project that engineering was doing. Unfortunately, that sidewalk improvement project had no funds that were earmarked for landscaping component. It was just to build sidewalks where there wasn't a sidewalk, and it required some tree removal, some street tree removal. And so they kind of came to me and said, "Hey, these healthy trees need to come out." And that's typically not something that I like to approve. And we kind of went back and forth, and we identified this as an area where there were very few street trees that existed. And if some component of the trees had to be removed in order to facilitate the sidewalk project, then perhaps we could use the opportunity of the sidewalk improvement project to kind of use their coattails, so to speak, to do an outreach program for the tree planting. And overall, I think it was good. A total of 3 mature street trees were removed, and already 14 trees have been replanted. So definitely a net gain. Obviously, the large trees, it will take some time for the canopy to be recovered, but the 14 trees over time will provide a significant canopy gain. And that was just the initial component. As is often the case when we do these neighborhood plantings, or I should say nonprofit tree planting organizations do these neighborhood plantings. They'll plant trees in a neighborhood, they'll do the outreach, they'll try to get the buy-in from the property owners and the residents to do the stewardship of the trees, to take care of them after they're initially planted, primarily watering. The street tree ordinance requires that property owners are responsible for watering of street trees, and the city does all other significant maintenance. And then you get other kind of people joining on, kind of riding on the coattails because they see the results of the tree planting that was done, and they say, hey, I like that. That looks pretty good. And we anticipate that many more trees will be planted out there. There's the potential to plant over 40 trees that we identified, 40 vacant sites that we identified in that area. And then just moving on to the heritage tree kind of administration overview. So as many of you know, as many of the commissioners know, the heritage tree ordinance was revised in 2019. It was approved by the city council in December of 2019, and then it was adopted by the council or implemented, I should say, in 2020, July 1 of 2020, with the start of our fiscal year. The revised heritage tree ordinance went into effect with a couple of exceptions. The enforcement component was put on hold because there was not the resources, given the budget constraints, to implement the enforcement components of the ordinance that had been revised. And actually the other component was reporting. That's not required, but just in keeping with tradition, we wanted to make sure to update the Environmental Quality Commission on kind of what we're doing here. So just these are the kind of the highlights of the procedural components of the revisions that we implemented. I think most of the commissioners are probably familiar with kind of the details of the components of the heritage tree ordinance that were revised in terms of the criteria that is used to evaluate the trees and the appeal process. But administratively, or the procedural components, this is essentially what we did. We developed these administrative guidelines. This is just an image of the front page of that. I believe it's a 3 or 4 page document. Really provides some detailed information. This is on our webpage. It's available to the public. I encourage you to look at it. We spent some energy in developing it. It really provides a lot of detailed information. One of the objectives of the revisions of the heritage tree ordinance, as many of you are familiar with, and I know Ms. Lucky is intimately familiar with, is to simplify the heritage tree permitting process. And a big component of that is just spelling out what the process is. And I really think the administrative guidelines really help to do that, to really walk residents and applicants through the process and to answer any questions that they have kind of upfront. The other component that we implemented was a list of pre-approved consulting arborists. So we put out a request for qualifications for eligible arborists. They need to be a certified arborist. They need to be qualified in risk assessment. And then they needed to provide writing samples to us just to make sure that the quality of work that was being submitted met the city standards to really, again, streamline the process both for the city and for property owners. So often in the past, we would get arborist reports where just more information was needed. It was just, it didn't have enough information for us to make a decision. And there was this back and forth, with the city, which was a draw on staff resources. I think was frustrating for a lot of residents and applicants as well, because they thought like, hey, I got an arborist and they provided this report. Why isn't it good enough? And so we really are just specific in terms of like what the qualifications are, what the elements of the arborist reports are, the minimum required elements are, and it's really helped, again, to streamline the process. And then the last significant procedural revision was the implementation of a permitting database, which has a public access component. And I think Joanna Chin, the city staff member, she sent all of the commissioners a link to that permitting database, and you can look up the status of an individual permit and kind of customize a dashboard. to look at specific areas that you're looking for. And Joanna's great with that. She's really familiar with the program, and she can answer any specific questions that you guys have. Just a quick summary of 2020. Again, it was a little bit of a weird year. We had a good 3 or 4 month period of time there where we were not actively inspecting trees out in the field. Nor could we accept applications in person, and we really had to kind of front load this online permitting system. We weren't really ready to roll it out. It was still kind of in the development phase, but we were just forced to do it. So, we definitely kind of took our knocks, and to some degree are still in the process of doing that, just to kind of get all the kinks out of it, because we had to just kind of roll it out a little bit before it was ready. In any case, we received 300 permit applications for a total of 318 trees. Of those, 207 were approved. 13 trees were denied for removal. 4 applications were withdrawn. And then 94 permits are pending. That last number is relatively high. One, we have a backlog because we had that period of time where we essentially weren't processing them, but they were still coming in. And then with the holiday closure as well. But then another significant component of that is that a large number of these pending permits are development related permits. And there's just simply more submittals that are required on the behalf of the applicant in the development process. And we, for instance, we require that the appraised value of the trees be provided. Sometimes that's not included in the arborist report, although we're getting better at it, again, with the list of approved arborists. But providing a landscape plan, again, the enforcement component of the heritage tree replacements was not implemented yet. It is technically a requirement that a developer provide a landscape plan for the replanting. We're not going out and inspecting it to ensure that the work was done, but we are requiring that that plan be submitted, and that was previously not done. And so it's just a tool for when and if the resources are made available to implement the enforcement component when we're all going out there to inspect. We have something to refer back to, but also it creates a greater expectation on the behalf of the applicant that the city is going to follow up with it, that we are tracking the replacement conditions of approval. So there's a lot of pending applications that are development related simply because the city they submitted an application, more information was needed, and the city is awaiting that additional information. There's also a process where we have to evaluate whether or not there's reasonable and feasible alternatives, and that's much more involved. We really have to kind of evaluate the design alternatives and the costs of those. And that takes a good amount of resources on behalf of the applicant because they have to come and provide alternative plans. And so it takes some time to develop those, and it takes some time for the city to review those as well. So those are the primary reasons for the significant backlog for the pending permits. And just moving on, I think that's all that I had for this evening. And I'm happy to answer any questions that the commission has.
Commissioner Gaylord?
Oh, do we need to take public comment before we ask questions, or we can ask clarifying questions?
We can ask clarifying questions. Exactly.
Okay. All right. So first of all, Christian, wow, that was really impressive. I'm so grateful to have you and the rest of your team on staff in Menlo Park, because trees are super important and feel like our trees are in really good hands. So on the question of having a large concentration of, I think you called it like a monoculture of aging trees in different neighborhoods, I can say in my neighborhood, I've felt concerned about this. So you kind of you sort of validated it's a concern. I live in Linfield Oaks, and we have a lot of sweet gums that I think, especially with the drought a couple of years running look really bad right now. I'm sure you're aware of it because they're getting pruned. But it looks like a bunch of them are going to fail around the same time. And so the question is, you identify that as a problem. What's the solution? And if you could speak to that, I'd appreciate it.
Yeah, sure. So great question. Yeah. So currently, what I also identified as a need for further analysis so that we can develop a management plan, right? Because I think what's really lacking, although it was a great step forward in terms of revising the heritage tree ordinance, what's really lacking is a larger overarching urban forest master plan or urban forest strategic plan that provides, that specifies goals and objectives that management plans can be based upon. So currently, we're simply evaluating each individual tree on its own merits, right? There's no proactive program to kind of deal with this particular scenario that I described and you described really well. But what my recommendation is to really move forward to developing a larger scale strategic plan that specifies goals such as the percentage of canopy that the community wants to achieve over time, so that those ecosystem services that the trees provide can be maximized and optimized. And then management plans and management strategies can be based upon those goals. Other objectives are planting programs objectives, a risk management plan, identifying what the level of acceptable risk is for the city. We've touched on that a little bit with the heritage tree ordinance, but that applies primarily to private property trees. So that's really my recommendation. In order to really make meaningful progress, in order to develop these management plans to deal with these issues, we need a larger strategic plan.
If I can just follow up with a question, the larger strategic plan, I would support that. What is that budget for a consultant to come in? Is that more staff? Like what's needed for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Full disclosure here, I'm kind of noticing the lights are going in and out around me. The power was out at my house. I live up here in the Santa Cruz Mountain for the last couple of days. So if it cuts out on me again, that's what's happening. Currently it's on, but just heads up. I noticed in the background, the lights are going on and off. In any case, yes. So to develop a master plan, I mean, really, the first thing is to make it a priority. I mean, it's been on the council priority list. I think for 2 out of the last 5 years, but it's never made the cut in terms of moving it forward. It's something that has been identified as a need that's there, but it's one of many needs and one of many needs that is competing with other community priorities. And so the first need is making it a priority so that it can be developed and explored, and analysis can be done on what resources are needed in order to move forward with this process. But yes, in all likelihood, it's probably going to provide or require some element of a consultant to bring in to develop that. And, it's going to need additional analysis as well. I mean, if you're developing canopy goals, they probably should not just be arbitrary, right? I mean, really doing a canopy analysis to determine what the level of canopy capacity is within the city of Menlo Park, and even beyond that, what the canopy capacity is in different neighborhoods. The industrial neighborhood that's north of Suburban Park is going to have a vastly different canopy capacity over time than that residential neighborhood. So all those are kind of important elements that need to be identified, and kind of the background information that needs to be gathered to develop such a plan.
Commissioner Martin.
Hi, thanks, Christian. One thing I wanted to mention, I live in Suburban Park, and I moved in here in early 2000. And at that time, we used to have quite a bit of the sudden limb drop scenario. And since you guys have been doing your routine maintenance, it has been like just miles better. Like I just don't see a lot of that. So I really appreciate the work you do. I know that those are messy trees, but they are also lovely for our neighborhood. So yeah, I have two questions. One is, thank you for providing the update on the replanting of the trees in the Pierce Road, I think you said. My question is, how are we, so that was maybe a dozen trees. How are we monitoring and how will we get updates to just kind of fulfill the promise of the 62 trees? Is there a way that the public can sort of be alerted to the progress of that and just making sure that that, you know, that sort of good faith effort is fulfilled? That's maybe my first, maybe you can answer that question first and then I'll follow up with my second.
Yeah. So great question. Yes, the Pierce Road component definitely was a part of that. And we're working on organizing additional plantings. There was one scheduled for later this month at like a ceremonial planting with the mayor, but then we had this kind of extended stay-at-home health order. So that was kind of undermined at the same time. So again, we're working with these challenges. It's really a challenge for a volunteer organization to kind of operate under these conditions. We've really required that they specify, the safety procedures that they're using. And I think with that in place that we can proceed, but it's going to be just at a reduced capacity. So it's going to be incremental progress on these. And yes, we are definitely currently working. I mean, we had these all kind of teed up to go in really the in the fall of last year. But just the conditions really limited what we could do. So we've already developed the plans. We've worked with the parts department. We've worked with Canopy. We've provided direction to them. We provided support to them. It's really just a matter of scheduling the projects themselves. So right now they're looking at late winter, early spring to do some additional plantings. The other components of it were to plant X number of trees in the Burgess Park kind of Civic Center campus area. And we've already identified those and we're working on coordinating that right now. I'm happy to provide updates to the EQC on the progress with that. Again, I do anticipate that it's going to be incremental instead of, maybe a big tree planting where it's 20 or 30 trees. It's probably going to be more like, 8 or 10 trees at a time. But yes, we are working on that, and I'm happy to provide updates. Okay,
yeah, that's totally understandable. I mean, I think we've all had to pivot with this. Who expected a pandemic, right? So that's totally makes sense. And I think I know that a bulletin went out, I think, with those last plantings, and I would just encourage the city to continue to do those types of public, notifications, because I think it's nice for the public to see that. And then my second question was, you mentioned having a landscaping plan for development sites. And I know I had to submit one of those when I built my house. I did find it odd at the time that I had to submit one because I built a new house. I decided to just go and build a whole new house, like scrap the foundation from the old house and whatnot. However, several of my neighbors did what's called a remodel. So they still kept their foundation, but they essentially did the same thing. They cleared the land. They did, almost, I would argue almost what I had to do, but they didn't have to submit a landscaping plan. And so I still see some properties that are in a lot of disarray with their landscaping. And I'm just curious, has that been rectified? Where are you guys now implementing a landscaping plan for all development, whether it's brand new construction or a remodel? And if not, I would highly recommend that you consider that.
Yeah, it's a great question. Short answer is no, it has not been rectified. I'm still not 100% sure myself when a landscape plan is required and when it is not. I know that I know elements that trigger it, such as grading and drainage requirements. Mm-hmm. When those are a component of the proposed development, that often triggers a landscape plan. When it is a use permit, that often triggers a landscape plan. But there are exceptions, I think, to both of those, and there has been inconsistency over time. I think there's even some confusion in the community development side of things, although they're doing the best that they can with the resources that they have. I think because of that, I think that's one of the reasons that we have required that these landscape replanting plans be submitted as long as they're development related, right? Because there's been that inconsistency over time. It's really been a challenge for me as the city arborist. You know, I intended to do kind of, I considered doing a high, one slide that was kind of the hierarchy of the kind of city structure in the different departments and kind of where I reside and where trees resides in that. I mean, right now the trees section is a section of the maintenance division, which is in the public works department. The community development department is responsible for requiring components like landscape plans associated with development. So that is a little bit of a challenge, and in that how do I put this? There has been that inconsistency. I guess the tool that we have at our disposal now is the revised heritage tree ordinance and the replacement requirements that are specific to development that are associated with that. And so right now, in the absence of having that rectified, and you're right, Commissioner Martin, that is an issue that needs to be addressed. We have this requirement that at minimum, a replanting plan that we identify as a landscape plan needs to be submitted in order for a development permit to be issued. So that on the tail end of it, and here's the other part of it, the replacement conditions are tied to, when they're associated with development, they're tied to the development itself. It doesn't make sense for the contractor or the owner to plant a tree before the contractor comes in and they're just demoing everything around it. And yeah, I mean, the tree's not being cared for, the landscape's being teared up. I mean, the tree's going to be dead before they're even done with the project. So it's associated with the final inspection of the development. Right now, that was a component of the revised ordinance that was not implemented. The resources made available that were intended to be made available for that inspection are not there, but we're requiring it nonetheless. And now we have this tool, this document at our disposal to follow up with that. So I know
okay,
that's
great.
not,
No, that's helpful to at least know that. I think it is a source of extreme frustration. Those of us that were required to submit a landscaping plan were not allowed to move into our house until the landscaping was done, which is like a 2 to 3 month delay, as you know, with rentals and whatnot. Yet still the neighbor across the street who could gladly move in and has terrible landscaping to this day gets away with that. So I just kind of think that's, I don't want to kind of take up time here, but I think that's really for the purposes of also having a good healthy canopy. We need to look at all of those development plans as one equal. They really are the same from the perspective of landscaping and having proper tree, like a good urban canopy. We need to kind of have a common approach, and that'll help alleviate a lot of frustration.
Do we have other clarifying questions? Oh, Commissioner Gaylord.
Yeah, Christian, can you speak to with climate change? So the conditions in the city, the climate is changing. So as you know, higher temperatures, more drought, probably more intense storms, the wind storms we're seeing. Are you, groundwater issues probably pulling up once we build levees over in Bellhaven. So I guess I'm asking, are you accounting for that and thinking about, how different tree species in the city, whether they're going to survive, and sort of building that into a plan, or also in the species that you recommend?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, similar to what I mentioned earlier, I mean, really, ideally, that would be driven by a master plan that identifies, the need for evaluating the existing species diversity and fostering greater species diversity and setting specific goals and objectives associated with that, so that a management plan can be developed specifically in order to meet those goals and objectives. But But in absence of that, what we're doing currently is there is a street tree management plan. It was last revised in 2006, so it's getting dated pretty quickly. But it's okay. I mean, it's something. It's a starting point, and it provides just very broad goals in terms of just trying to maintain diversity. It doesn't set any specific, numeric goals in achieving that, but it just identifies that as a need, which is good. And what we're trying to do internally is just trying to revise that or components of it. It identifies in that street tree management plan to develop a planting plan, which was done to some degree, but never really implemented, and it's way out of date. And it was sitting, essentially when I started on the job like 6 years ago, it was sitting on the shelf of my predecessor, and I asked him, "What's this?" He's like, "I don't know. What is that?" So it was just, one of those plans that was developed, paid for, and it sat on the shelf and not implemented because, there wasn't like a reporting or monitoring component that was identified and required as part of the plan. And I could understand why it wasn't implemented, because it really wasn't. It was developed by a contractor that was in Southern California. It identified Southern California species. It wasn't really appropriate for Menlo Park. So what we're doing currently is we're trying to revise that internally, and I've actually been working on it for some time. I had an intern at our disposal who's since moved on, but she did a significant amount of work on revising that. And identifying specifically drought-tolerant species was one of the most significant components. And to a lesser degree, these climate-adaptive species, there's less data on that right now. So again, further analysis is needed. But there's a lot of good resources out there in terms of, resiliency of trees to just the harsh urban growing environment. And a lot of that is consistent with like some of the anticipated climate change, and drought being one of the most significant components of that. So we're currently in the process of revising it. I'm kind of implementing it as I go. Essentially we're in planting season right now, and it's probably about 80% complete. We're actually in the process of bringing it over into our GIS component with the city so that all apartments can use it, and that can help hopefully expedite the completion of the plan.
Do we have any other clarifying questions? If not, we can move to public comment. Ms. Lucky, do we have any public comments? I don't see other clarifying questions.
Thank you, Chair Price. So at this time, if an attendee wishes to make public comment on this agenda item, please do raise your hand that is next to your name in the attendee list, and I will be able to unmute your microphone so that you may speak. And with that, I do have 3 hands raised. I'll go down the order that they are in on my screen. So starting with Mr. Peter Edmonds. I have unmuted your microphone, Mr. Edmonds. You should be able to speak now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lucky. And thank you, Mr. Bonner, for a comprehensive report. I would like to acknowledge that the local park that I use, Seminary Park, is very well maintained, and I appreciate that. However, I have several questions. With regard to your first slide, were the estimated values that were shown on the right-hand column updated to be consistent with a revision of the guide that you use, I believe, which was in the process of publication when the task force was completing its work. So I point out that environmental factors were not valued at all under previous guide criteria. And the reason why there are 12 or so environmental factors in the first clause of the revised heritage tree ordinance is to draw attention to these factors and to an expectation that they will be valued. So That's the first question. Secondly, relating to my introductory comments this evening about noise, that includes chipper noise from arborists who are pruning and removing trees. And it's my understanding that there is no enforcement of the codes that relate to noise or other aspects of tree preservation. That's to say code number 8 regarding noise during weekends. That's information from a police officer. So is there any expectation that that glaring deficit will be remedied, assuming my information is correct? Clear that the opportunity to remove trees during weekends is gladly grasped by some developers, including the ones at 1000 El Camino Real on Sunday, June 23rd, 2019. And they made a hell of a lot of noise about it, which must have been audible in the neighboring residential areas, Middlefield Avenue, for example, and others in that neighborhood behind the commercial strip. Is it true that there's no violation unless a resident complains?
Sorry, Mr. Edmonds, that was a 3 minutes for your public comment. So we need to take the next comment because we have to adhere to 3 minutes per person. Thank you for your public comment. And Rebecca, I know you said that there were other public commenters as well. Who is next?
Yes, thank you. So the next hand that is raised is Miss Judy Rocio. I have unmuted your microphone. You are able to speak now. You may have to unmute yourself sometimes.
Yes. There you go.
Okay, thank you. Thank you,
You're
Rebecca.
welcome.
Thank you for commissioners. Thank you, Mr. Bonner, for the report. I have 3, maybe 4 things I want to have responses to, so I don't know if you get to respond to me, but one of the things that really stood out about the urban canopy is that 52% is under the other. And so my question is, what's the other? Is that private? Is that just the species, the trees, the numbers of trees that are private? Second thing about that is that there were no redwood trees listed. You had 10 species listed that were managed by the city, but there were no redwood trees listed. And I know that you guys manage redwood trees in the parks. There are several parks in Menlo Park that have lots of redwood trees. So why aren't redwood trees listed in your Menlo Park inventory of species? That was my number 1 question with some subparts. Number 2, when will the trees at the Willow Road and 101 interchange be replaced? I understand these may not be considered Menlo Park trees, as in they're not managed by us, so they're not in our inventory, but they are special to us. And it's been over a year that intersection has been complete, and there has not been, to my knowledge, any replacements of all those beautiful large heritage redwood trees. Okay, so that's number 2. What's going to happen with that? Number 3 is, oh my God, we're planting a couple more, like 19 more trees than we're cutting down, but even so, we're still losing the number of trees. We're recording more, decline than we are planting. So that is a serious problem. We need to rectify that. Okay, that's 3. And number 4, the last thing I want to bring up here is something that I know others might be commenting on tonight, and that is the number of trees slated for removal in San Francisco Creek near the Pope Chaucer Street Bridge that is planned for replacement or upgrade in 2024, I believe. So the idea there is that there's dozens, tens, I think 60 something trees, I'm sorry, I don't remember the exact number, that are slated to be removed just to replace this bridge that I don't believe needs to be replaced. And so how are we going to, as a city, address that big picture issue of protecting those trees from removal in a kind of an environment where I feel like there are other ways we can deal with that, with flooding in Menlo Park here in the Willows. So with those 4 things, I'm gonna just drop it there, even though I have a lot of other questions about why, you know, with 318 permits and 207 were approved and there's still 94 pending, it seems like to me we're approving a lot of tree removals that should be considered a little more purposefully. Okay, that's it. I'm done.
Thank you, Judy. Much appreciated. And the next public, and to answer your question, we will do our best to address the questions in the discussion, but we have to continue with public comment right now. So Ms. Lucky, you had there's another public comment, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Chair Price. So the next commenter is Ms. Brielle Johnnick. Sorry if I mispronounced that, but I will unmute your microphone now. You'll be able to speak. You may have to unmute your microphone as well to speak on your side.
Okay, this is Brielle Junk, but actually it's a trick. I'm going to hand the computer over to Steve Schmidt, and he is going to make the comments.
And Brielle will clean up for me after I'm, if I've missed anything after I'm done. So I'm Steve Schmidt. I was on the Environmental Commission, as was Brielle, many years ago, and I served on the City Council for 8 years. Trees have always been our focus, and I'm glad that Menlo Park's trees seem to be in good hands with Mr. Bonner and your commission. What I'd like to ask relates to Judy Rocchio's comments about the creek and the riparian forest along the creek. In our neighborhood, which is near the Pope Chaucer Bridge, the creek and its trees are a dominant kind of reassuring element in our daily lives. We see this area all the time. And the plan that the San Francisco Creek Joint Powers Authority is proposing removes a lot of that riparian forest, especially in the neighborhood of the Pope Chaucer Bridge. It's probably a total of 200 yards of vegetation surrounding the bridge that's going to disappear with this proposed plan. And we're not much, but we do notice these things, and we think that the creek and its trees deserve to be protected and monitored by an official sanctioned agency rather than a group of residents that have other things to concern themselves with. So we'd see the commission and Mr. Bonner take this on as part of his urban forest management plan and keep track of the project, maybe send a representative of the city to the Joint Powers Authorities. I think they're monthly meetings, and to make sure that the residents are educated about what the risks are to their surroundings. It's important for the effort to protect the trees to have the force of city government behind them. So that's my comment on this issue. There is also a danger of removing more than the 60 or 70 trees that Ms. Rocchio mentioned if this plan goes forward with its goal of providing 100-year flood protection. So I'd like to hand it over to Brielle to do the closing comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And
Could I have 3 minutes also?
Yes.
Yes.
The reason that we are presenting to you tonight is because tonight is the night that you're going to be finalizing or talking or discussing your 2-year plan. So we thought the timing was perfect to ask that this be added to what your commission oversees. And after we heard Mr. Bonner, we were reminded about how we really do need an expert, you know, to run this kind of effort. I don't think it's a matter of people in the neighborhood being too busy to do this, but I will tell you that at our age, it's really hard for us to monitor the tree and educate the public and protect the trees. It's over our pay scale. And so we would like for the city to stand up and acknowledge that these trees, especially, you know, those that are on the Menlo Park side, are our responsibility, and the city really needs to protect them. So we would like you to understand that this thing could be worse. Right now, it's this is like 2024 when these trees are going to start coming out. But if for some reason the design changes and it becomes flood walls, then we're not talking 69 trees. We're talking hundreds of trees, because flood walls are going to be they're going to be 4 feet higher than the banks. And so that requires all those trees to come out. So it could be worse, but we've got to start monitoring what the JPA is doing, and we have to have somebody official there. Believe me, we don't have the gravitas. We can stand up and take the microphone at the JPA meetings, but it's not like Chris Bonner standing up and his speaking, or one of the commissioners, one of you people. So anyway, thanks for what you do, you guys. We really understand it. We did it, and carry on. And we look forward to working with you some more. Thank you.
Thank you. Rebecca, do we have additional public speaker or public commenters at this time?
We do not have any other hands raised at this time.
Thank you. So if we have concluded public comment, we can return the agenda item to the commissioners for discussion. It looks like Commissioner Cabot has his hand raised to begin.
Thank you very much. Mr. Bonner, you mentioned that as part of the heritage tree removal permits that are issued, the applicants must submit a replanting plan, and I think you mentioned it was hard to.
Commissioner Cabot, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt, Commissioner. Could you please speak up a little bit?
Yes,
sure.
Yep. You mentioned that it was generally difficult to monitor the replanting plans of the developments that take out a heritage tree, and that you also mentioned that there now are more online plan monitoring systems. And so I was wondering, with the number of interested community members in Menlo Park, if there might be a process that would be acceptable to have to rotate into view maybe plans that are 2 years old or so, 2 years old and older, so that people can go look and see the trees, and that there might be reports back to you about the condition, so that there are more folks looking at the matter, and the community has a way to be involved in regrowing the canopy.
Yeah, did you want me to respond to that?
You can. Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. And Commissioner Cabot, I apologize if I didn't hear all that. What I think I heard was regarding the tracking of the replacement trees for development, that there are some challenges with replacing there. And one of the suggestions that you had was a strategy that looks at tracking them over time, like going back after a 2-year period of time to kind of evaluate the condition of the trees. Yeah, so that's again, this is all kind of, dependent upon, additional resources to go back and do the tracking. What we have in place now is—
Hey, Christian, sorry,
Yes.
I just want to jump in because it sounds like it was hard for you to hear Tom. He was asking, could residents be involved? Could residents go out and do that work of sort of monitoring if it's online? Could you just make it clear to residents that, these are the projects that we don't have an inspection team yet?
Yeah, that's a good question. That's an interesting idea. I like the idea of it. I imagine that the city attorney may have some reservations around that. So just in terms of members allowing access to members of the public. But I think another way to consider it is just, like a volunteer type of resource. And maybe if like specific volunteers could be identified as working as volunteers for the city of Menlo Park, then that may be easier to address like liability and privacy issues. But again, yeah, it's an interesting idea. I think it has potential, but likely something we need to get feedback from the city attorney on.
Thank you.
Commissioner Martin.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the Chaucer Pope Bridge, the Joint Powers Authority work for the flood plan, whatnot. So this is an issue just for historical purposes that has come to our commission before, and there was a time that we had a ad hoc committee, subcommittee that was looking into this, and I know the residents were very involved with this, and I have to be honest, I did not realize this was still a thing. I thought, I mean, it's something we spent a lot of time talking about before. So I'm a little bit kind of perplexed at how it's gone quiet and now it's coming up. And I was a bit shocked too at the number of trees being sought for removal. I mean, that riparian zone is beautiful, and there's been a huge resistance to have certainly any kind of flood walls and all sorts of things. So these things were discussed heavily at length, probably, I want to say 5 years plus ago. So I guess that's one comment, just for those of you that don't know, maybe Janelle remembers this. I don't know that we have anybody from the city. I thought I saw Drew Combs' name, but how are we addressing this? And should we, at a minimum, it seems like we should be inviting somebody to come talk to our commission to help us understand this, and or when we get to talking about our plan, consider revisiting that ad hoc committee to kind of get more details, because I'm a little bit surprised that 5 years down the road now we're back at this, and I really don't have a clear idea or understanding of where it's come since then. So that's just a comment.
I can speak to at least the part. So I was looking into this as well. I believe Drew Combs is the representative. Usually Menlo Park has a city council member who is on the board of the Joint Powers Authority. And so he is the representative for the city right now, which I believe would mean that he would be a great person to reach out to. So for those of you who may still be listening from the public comment, Drew Combs, who represents District 2, is he is the city, he's also the mayor. He is the person who is on the Joint Powers Authority board right now. And so would be involved in these decisions. But again, to Deb's point, I am not clear on, I'm aware of the history and that the flood walls came back up again as part of the conversation recently. But I don't know what the relationship between the EQC and the Joint Powers Authority is. And I don't think we've had any insight into this particular project. So I don't know if Rebecca or Christian, if you have any ideas of what role the EQC plays in this, or for members of the public and for us, what we can do, or if we should take this up with a different somebody else, like Drew or the Joint Powers Authority Board itself.
Yeah, so I don't know specifically EQC's role. Ms. Lecky could speak to that, but I do know that this is something that Public Works has been developing for some time. And it probably would not be unreasonable to request Public Works to provide an update to the commission.
Thank you.
And I would just add that, yeah, so Mayor Combs is on the JPA, and generally with all council members that serve on boards or commissions in at the regional level do have support staff that also attend the meetings. So for example, I attend SBWMA meetings with council members just to, help answer any questions that they may have. So I'm trying to recall the staff member that attends the JPAs. I know it's a very high level management staff position that does attend those meetings. So I can look into that some more and try to find who that is. But as far as the EQC, again, it's, the EQC is an advisory body to the city council. The city council directs the EQC on issues they would like advice on. The EQC does also have a work plan where they can also offer ideas to the city council when their work plan is adopted on areas of interest, as well, or areas of significant environmental or sustainability context within the community.
Thank you. Commissioner Gaylord?
Yeah, this is a little bit of speculation, so take it with a grain of salt. And this is for members of the public who spoke. The science of climate change is really changing quite rapidly. And I know there were some I think they were updates to FEMA maps released recently that show really very significant flooding, which is very, very likely, devastating flooding actually all along the creek. So it's possible, I don't know, but I would guess that whatever plans were in place a couple of years ago, just because of how quickly climate change is happening and how much worse we're realizing it's going to be, that it's possible those plans are evolving. And I think it's a really tough situation because, I don't want to see trees removed, and yet there could be really devastating property damage that's going to be done. So anyway, I don't know the details, but I'm just wondering if climate change and the increased flooding predictions from these updated FEMA maps may be an issue.
Thank you. Commissioner Martin?
Yeah, I'm just wondering, maybe at a minimum, I think I'd like to suggest that we agendize this for the next meeting and invite somebody to speak to us on this topic, just simply because I know it is very important to our residents. I think at the time that this was coming up, we had a couple Willow, EQC members that were in the Willows and very tapped into this. I know back then that the Chaucer Bridge expansion was part of the discussion. So it sounds like maybe Josie's right. Maybe there's been some new data that stress urgency around expanding that bridge, but I kind of had thought that it was resolved and mitigated already. And so that's why something must have changed. We just don't know because we don't have insight. And I don't really know. Also, I would like to understand how Drew is representing the city perspective, but also the resident concern. So I don't know that either. So I really thank the public for bringing it up. And I think that we should agendize it and get and ask for an invite somebody to come and speak to us about it.
Thank you. And we can remember to address that when we talk about future agenda items at the end of the meeting. So thank you, Commissioner Martin. Are there other points of discussion regarding the urban canopy update? Oh, yes, Commissioner London.
Hi, I was just thinking about the idea of agendizing it and wondering if it might be a more effective use of our time to just obtain a written update and then see what our potential role might be in this. Just because our meetings tend to be crammed with lots of stuff, I wonder if that's a way to kind of two-step it. And once we've seen the written kind of update report, then we can decide whether to agendize it. I don't know how urgent it is, nor what our role is meant to be in it. So that's, I just adding further comment to Deb's point.
Thank you. I think that understanding that is in the context of revisiting it is really helpful. Commissioner Gaylord, it looked like you were gonna have a discuss. Go ahead.
Yeah, I guess I don't know how this works, but I'm very interested in the question that I asked about the street, and appreciate Christian's answer, the street tree management plan and the planting plan, and how that's evolving with the climate change concerns for drought specifically. It's really a concern. So I don't know, it sounds like it's happening and it's sort of, you're working on it. I guess I would like to maybe get a firmer idea of when that will be revised, and if we could get a copy of it. Again, I don't think maybe you need to come present because we have this cramped schedule, but I'd like to see the revision when it's issued.
And Christian, but just to speak to Josie's point, you were also talking about there not being kind of the prioritized resources for the master plan, and what's in place instead is from 2006, and it's a street tree kind of guideline. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. So what's
Okay.
currently being developed, just to clarify, is a component of the existing current street tree management plan.
Okay.
And yes, the intent there is to revise the street tree management plan with this planting component, essentially like a street tree planting plan. And so again, that effort is strictly internal. You know, unfortunately, there's not specific resources dedicated to this. This is I'm just working on it in my abundance of spare time. But we've been working on it for some time, and absolutely, we definitely will update the commission. The commission reviewed the plan previously in 2006 and recommended approval when it was initially adopted. So if any revision would go through a similar process, absolutely. And just ballpark, boy, it'd be great if it was done in 2021. And another intern would help with that effort.
Commissioner Gaylord?
Yeah, we actually just have a subcommittee on trees and other things, but that was just volunteer step forward at our last meeting. And I'm wondering, this could be something that a subcommittee could, I'm not going to volunteer others for this, but a subcommittee could maybe assist you with some of the research into the drought tolerant trees. I'm just throwing that out there as a possibility. And yeah.
I welcome any and all assistance, and if I could meet with the tree subcommittee, you know, if nothing else, just to continue to move the effort forward. Thank you.
Thank you. And my comment on this agenda item is, I think we hear a lot from the community on two issues, one being climate change and the other being the urban canopy. And due to the amount of interest from the city's residents in the urban canopy, I think that I would be supportive of stressing that to council and requesting, again, we can add it. I would be supportive of including it in the work plan, but I would also be supportive of stressing to council that this is something that we would like to see the city prioritize. It may not be something in 2021, but if they're looking out at their priorities for this year and thinking about it going to next year, I think that, again, the residents come to us most often to speak about the urban canopy and the climate change, and we've dedicated a lot of resources and have support for climate change. But now that we've wrapped up the Heritage Tree Task Force, I think it's possible to have resources dedicated to urban canopy and having a master plan as I've had similar observations to Christians as well. So that would be my comment. I know we have one other public comment that did not make it in. Ms. Lucky, did you want to open up the public comment?
Thank you, Commissioner Price. I do see a hand raised. Mr. Scott Marshall, I have unmuted your microphone. You may have to do it on your end, and you should be able to speak.
All right. Hi, commissioners. Hi. Sustainability manager Rebecca Lucky. I am sorry I jumped in late. I somewhat thought that we were going to talk about what the options that the EQC had for the urban tree canopy in your next section. But since you're talking about it, yes, the Chaucer Street Bridge is going to be rebuilt. And I did go to a meeting with a former commissioner, Mitch Slomiak, when I was a EQC commissioner about 5 years ago. And it seemed like there was 50 or 60 people there at the meeting from the neighborhood. And it seemed like we clearly stated as a group that we didn't want any drastic changes to that area. And it seemed like that the plan was to do a lot of changes along the full length of San Francisco Creek, including some flood retention basins up further north, upstream, excuse me, and not really have retaining walls all the way along the creek. Consequently, like Commissioner Martin said, that's the way we thought it was left. And as I have found out recently doing some research, that there has been very little communication with the neighborhood about what is going on with this plan. So my recommendation would be that in your 2-year plan that's coming up later tonight, maybe you put your heritage tree urban canopy master plan as part of your priority list. And then you could also, once you put it in a priority list, then through what you've said tonight, you can monitor what's going on with the Joint Powers Authority and then come back to the public and let them know what's going on with the trees. Because if the neighborhood knew about how many trees would be removed, I think that we would have quite a coalition of people who would want to see what are the plans and how can some of these tree removals be avoided, because some of them are heritage trees and that does fall into the EQC's lap. So basically that's it. Thank you very much for allowing me some time. Thank you for letting me go in there a little bit later. I'm sorry I got a little confused on the computer there, so I appreciate it. But good luck. I appreciate what the EQC is doing. Thanks again. Goodbye.
Thank you, Scott. So now we can return the meeting to the EQC discussion. Is there a commissioner who wanted to have comments or propose any actions? Yes, Commissioner Gaylord.
I guess I just have one other question. Urban Tree Master Plan, I was trying to figure out what are the resources required because we do have this tension on with the EQC work plan, which I was working on with the subcommittee. You know, what can we fit on there? What is going to require staff time? My understanding that kind of from staff was that that would require a lot of staff time, and I'm trying to grok why that would be. Was it because of an urban tree master plan would require a lot of public outreach? Is that the piece that would require a lot of staff time? And maybe Ms. Lucky can speak to that, or Mr. Bonner. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Ms. Lucky, I'm waiting if you want to jump in. I'm happy to answer it either way.
Yeah, so I can start, and if there's anything else you want to add or I missed, feel free to jump back in. So I think as far as staff resources, as you know, I mean, we're very limited on many city priorities and administration of different programs. I could name some of them that we've already paused on, like the Zero Waste Plan implementation is a good example. And so for us to probably move forward on a project like this, you know, it would require us to probably contract or get consulting, and then someone would need to manage those consultants along with that. And again, given where the constraints are with the organization right now and managing both the pandemic and our operations, it would need to probably have an additional budget associated with that, and the council would need to include that either in their work plan or consider it amongst all the other priorities that that they'll be considering in the next couple of months.
Yeah, I would compare it to the revisions of the Heritage Tree Ordinance, that effort. I mean, that required, a project manager, staff, and Miss Lucky was in that role. And that, required a lot of her dedicated time just to manage the consultants that were working on it and the outreach components. And I mean, it's just, it almost certainly would need a budgeted item. And again, this was something that was on the budget priority list. Historically, it's made it on there. It just has not made the final cut.
Thank you. That's very helpful. Do we have any other questions or comments from commissioners? And I'm trying to scroll to make sure I'm seeing everyone. I don't see anybody looking to speak. I think it's a staff report. So Ms. Lucky, we don't have to take a vote on it. We've discussed different things that we would be interested in, but any actions associated with them could fall under a different agenda item. Is that correct?
Correct.
Excellent. So if there aren't any other further discussion points, we can move to the next. Oh, sorry, Commissioner Cabot.
Just one quick question. It was brought up earlier by a public speaker. In the initial pie chart that Mr. Bonner was able to show us about the inventory of city-owned trees, not the private ones, there among the 10 species listed was not redwoods. And so are they among the others, making up the 52% of the other species of trees that the city manages?
Yes, that's correct. So the 52% is indeed all of the other species that are not included in the top 10 most frequently occurring species. And redwoods are certainly in the other, but probably why they don't occur in the most top 10 is it's not a widely planted street tree. There's definitely a lot of redwoods in parks. They're definitely appropriate in parks. They're really inappropriate in the vast majority of street tree planting scenarios, and the most of the public trees are street trees. So that's probably why they're not more frequently occurring.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no other questions or comments, we can move to the next agenda item. I apologize. I'm shuffling through pieces of paper on my computer. The second agenda item is on our agenda is D2, which is the review and discussion of the 2-year commission work plan prepared by the subcommittee of the Environmental Quality Commission. So, and I believe commissioners are going to be presenting this. So I'd like to introduce, okay. And who from the commission is the person? It looks like it's all 3 individuals, but I didn't know if somebody was leading the presentation.
We haven't talked about it.
Okay, no problem.
Leah, Tom, I'm happy to do it, or Leah, if you would like to do it, or Tom.
Thank you for doing it, Josie.
Okay.
I am turning the meeting over to whoever is leading the conversation.
Okay. All right. So we're counting on the fact that you've all read this. So what I did was I basically took the feedback from the commission from the last meeting and incorporated it along with Leah and Tom, incorporated it into the document. Ms. Lucky had some comments and we incorporated most of those comments, but we had a couple outstanding kind of questions for the commission. And so if people have questions or things they want to ask, we can do that. Otherwise, the hope is we can discuss a couple of things and then approve the plan and put it behind us. The main changes I think that the commission requested were around changing the action items from things that in some of the language around it seeming like we were either doing the work ourselves or sort of supporting staff to making recommendations to council. So sort of changing the orientation of like who was doing what sort of thing. So we did that, and so maybe I don't know how to do this. I guess I'd like to ask if there are questions. Can we do this more of the working style meeting, you know, the way we did it last time, where it's just more back and forth among the commissioners? Ms. Lucky?
Yes, it's really up to you how you'd want to start.
Should
Okay.
we could start by taking public comment and then move to the discussion. Would that work?
Yeah. Yes, that would
Okay.
work.
So in order to have a working style meeting, we're going to start with the public comment. So I would like to ask Ms. Lucky, are there any public comments on this agenda item at this time?
Thank you, Chair Price. So if there are any members of the public or attendees that would like to make a comment on this agenda item, which is to review and discuss the draft 2-year work plan of the EQC, you can raise your hand. It's the little icon next to your name in the attendees list, and I will be able to unmute your microphone so that you may speak for up to 3 minutes. And with that, I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, then we will return the meeting to the commissioners and have a working style discussion. And just reminding people we'll do our best to take turns using the mute button.
Okay, so I guess my first question is, hopefully having reviewed the document, are there people who have questions or objections to anything that's there? And then we can go to the couple items where Ms. Lucky had a question. We can discuss those. So any questions from commissioners?
I didn't have a question.
Okay. All right. So the questions that came up, and Ms. Lucky, feel free to jump in if I miss anything here. One was, there was a question about, sorry, I'm flipping through my notes here. We left the long-term, okay, long-term number. So if you look to this page on the far right, this under long-term, the second bullet, we're sort of changing the language, change the language around a little bit. But the idea was with the climate action plan, you know, we can't actually decrease the threat of sea level rise unless we do everything we can to eliminate our fossil fuel use, and then also make it easy for other cities to copy us, because it requires a larger effort. You know, that the idea is what Menlo Park does sort of sets as a leadership position on these issues could then be copied by other cities, which then increases the likelihood that the state would actually implement something similar, you know, similar to what we're seeing with the REACH codes. So this idea of actually being intentional about making the materials that we produce like easy for other cities to copy, I think we're suggesting in that second bullet that we just, doesn't need to be very involved, but it just needs to be, we need to have a plan as opposed to, you know, not making those materials available or making them hard to find on a website, for example. We'd like a more concerted effort at that. So that's what that is. I think staff was maybe concerned about that. So Ms. Lucky, if you want to speak to that.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Gillard. So my main kind of thinking, and again, it could be, maybe I don't see the end result of it, but I just want to understand more of what that looks like, because right now we do have on the website through our climate action plan page all of the initial, so like the REACH codes, The sustainable fleet policy is on there. And typically when I do get questions from other cities, I'm able to point them in that direction or send them the direct link so that they can access all the information that they need. Where I thought that there could be constraints is, if there is an idea for staff to actively go out and engage other staff members, which again, this is more at a higher level than staff to engage other cities to take action that we're taking. And so it may not be the best role for staff in that level of engagement with other cities. Certainly we can share information. I do go to regional meetings. There's the RICAPS meeting that's held every other month or so, and briefing other cities on what we're doing. And the only other area too is, when we did do the reach codes, cities automatically came to us because they had found out information. And actually there was quite a bit of flurry kind of after the few months after we adopted the reach codes, where it did take quite a bit of time to sit down with cities. They actually came to the city, their building officials. And so Chuck and I would sit with them for about an hour, talking through the issues and how we arrived at some of our conclusions or why the policy was shaped a certain way. And so in that regard, I think there are constraints. When we do something bold, there is a reaction. So I guess my concern is if we're continuing to implement climate action plan initiatives, but then we're being delayed in these other initiatives because we're having to then kind of really spend quite a bit of time supporting other cities in that effort, then I think there could be constraint issues. If there's partnerships available to link up, if there are other cities working on existing building electrification, again, that kind of tends to naturally happen because they hear about it and then they want to join on. So I guess that's where I just want to make sure that there's some clear kind of guidance on what that looks like, above what we already do and what we would do. So we would definitely wouldn't turn people, if we did an existing, if we adopted a building code for existing electrification of existing buildings, then we would certainly, welcome anybody who had questions and sit down with them. So it's not like we wouldn't do that at all, but it is a natural reaction to those kind of policies to reach out to us.
Thank you, Ms. Lucky. I really do appreciate the outreach that you've been able to do on the initial reach code effort. And I think that was quite helpful in helping many cities look at the problem in depth and see it from a staff perspective. And so your being able to do that is what ended up influencing the strategy of the climate action plan that the council adopted. And it was very clear in that climate action plan that this kind of leverage strategy of making information available to others and spending the time that it took to do that sharing was important. And I think it does not, it doesn't require cajoling other city staffs to take actions they don't feel like taking. It is simply trying to make available templates, resources, your own experience, the anecdotes, the kind of things that help other people move, and that then helps spread the message. And from what I see in the whole climate preservation community, it is being effective. This type of sharing is working. And I just wanted to point out what we're trying to put into the work plan for the commission is essentially supporting you on that matter, and then ourselves looking at it as an activity we as citizens can also assist with.
Deb. I think Deb was next.
Oh, yeah, I think the spirit of this bullet is really great. And it sounds to me like this kind of is happening organically by virtue of, the work that we're doing. And maybe when I read this bullet, when it says recommend city strategy, well, a strategy entails developing a plan and being more deliberate. And maybe we just reword this so that we're not expecting Rebecca and staff to have a written strategy plan, but it's more just a rewording of how you're kind of partnering already with cities that are coming to you. There's outreach, there's other avenues to collaborate, but maybe if we just soften the language a bit so it's not requiring staff to come up with a strategy. Is that kind of what would that make more sense, Rebecca?
That could be a possible way forward.
So I can just say that we did try, I think we did try to soften it. So it would be great, we'd be happy to hear your ideas, Deb. Commissioner Martin, if you had a specific recommendation for softening it further.
You want me to try to do that right now?
Well,
because I could. I mean, I think it's just something like encourage city participation and leadership in helping other cities to achieve whatever it is. It's more like an encouragement, participating. But if we get rid of an active word like strategy, you know, strategy is a word that's used a lot, but it really, if you think about what a strategy is, you got to get your points out. You got to put a plan together. So I think if we just use a different word than strategy, we achieve what we're trying to do here. So that's kind of what I'm saying. Just soften it further by making this more of an organic and encourage this leadership, collaboration, participation. So however we want to reword that, but those are some more.
I saw Josie and Janelle, but I don't know if Janelle still had her hand up.
And I'm sorry, I'll just add one more kind of note. I mean, because thinking about it too, I've had some time to think about this bullet point. And I think too, I mean, strategy could be used. I just want to be cautious, of course, but you know, in thinking about a strategy, typically a really great strategy is having, you know, other elected officials talk to other elected officials about, hey, here's what we're doing. And that is happening too at the council level. And that could be the strategy where, I mean, that's really the only mechanism. Staff cannot really go to another city and say, you know, this is what we're doing. We'd like you to do that. Again, usually like they'll come to us or we'll give a presentation at some forum and then there'll be questions asked, but it really does happen at the political level to kind of take on our ideas. So I guess what I'm saying is you could leave it as strategy, but just noting that the strategy would probably need to be at a council level with council members talking to other council members in other cities.
Thank you. And I think Josie and then Janelle.
Janelle, did you want to go?
No, I actually put my hand back down. I'm
okay.
The conversation, how it's going.
Okay. So the way I was envisioning, so for example, so I think that Rebecca has done a lot. I think there were a lot of resources dedicated to responding to questions, and I want to acknowledge that. But I think that if we were more, instead of just being reactive to questions, but actually a little bit more, thoughtful sounds pejorative because I think we were thoughtful, but just putting a little bit more forethought into, you know, we probably are going to get a lot of questions. How do we prepare? How do we get our website, you know, the climate action page for our website is just a little tough to get through. I mean, the reach codes is way down at the bottom. So if you read through the first 10 bullets, you get to it. Climate action plan is way down at the bottom. So if you're persistent, you can find what you need on that webpage, but I think it could use a revamp. I think that council members, you know, if it was planted in their minds, like we'd like to try to get spots at conferences, you know, where you're speaking or where staff is speaking or whatever, this is a way that we can take the message further and have a bigger impact on the issue. But I just don't think that we're thinking about that. So it's not, I think we just need, and I think that the commission or subcommittee could do this sort of thinking about like, what are the different ways that we could get the message out there? And I don't think it's something that necessarily needs to be done with the existing staff. Like I would actually recommend to council that like this needs, you know, a new staff hire. And I think the returns in terms of if we could have an outsized impact, the returns to the city financially would be great. And I could absolutely make an economic case for that. So I'm not suggesting we do this with the limited resources that we have, but that I would go to bat with the council for actually putting more resources on this specifically.
And it's just I want to just ask one clarifying question there. So what I remember from this kind of area of the plan was that it was a lot around the idea that Menlo Park is a leader, right? And that Menlo Park, here it uses language bold action, but the idea was we had some success with the leadership Menlo Park provided in the REACH codes, and we were thinking about how we could broaden that. And so I think I would say that what I hear you saying, Josie, is you would continue to recommend that council consider Menlo Park as a leader in the climate action space. And in order to be a leader, we also have to share our knowledge. And so what resources are we putting behind sharing our knowledge? And so I think that it's also, so to me, that makes sense. And I think I think that nuance is not necessarily, like to Deb's point, clear in the language. And I think we could go either way. We could say we would like to see the city be more sort of specific in how we're a leader. But I also like Deb's recommendation of saying at this point, we could also take the word strategy out and have it speak to more of the sentiment behind at least what I recall, the original intent of this, which was that Menlo Park operate as a leader. And what I hear you saying, Josie, is how do we put more thought behind what that leadership looks like? Anyway, so those are the two sides that I think of, and I almost think of them a little bit separately because it depends, like you said, Josie, on whether or not the additional resources are available. But I love the spirit of how can we support other cities in taking these steps, because that obviously benefits Menlo Park as well, because it's a everyone's in this together kind of a scenario. So anyway, those are my thoughts. Does anyone else have any comments on this or other elements of the plan? And sorry, I can't see everybody at once. Yes, Janelle.
That raise hand is so confusing because it's the one thing that's at the very bottom. Yeah, so I really appreciate this discussion. And I do think, we're in this climate crisis with a lot of urgency. And so one of the ways by which we kind of judge our work should be how much can it spread to other cities? If we just do something really great in Menlo Park, but it's not something that other cities take us up and do, I don't know that it's near as valuable to spend our time on it. And when it's things like, now we've seen an example of the gas in new buildings kind of REACH code, that we are being looked to as a leader. We should do more of that. So I'd like to see our focus be on that. I think we should move forward with the idea that we the EQC are doing as much of this as we can. And Rebecca, I know you're really great about speaking up and saying, hey, if we take this on, this extra thing, we're going to have to drop something. So what do you want to drop? So I feel like we don't necessarily have to spell out everything right now. We could leave it as strategy and then kind of see where we bump up against lack of resources to move forward.
Thank you. Yes, Deb.
Yeah, I kind of like the spirit of this bullet too. And this could even be at a minimum, really earmarking specific speaking opportunities. Like that's, if we want to get our word out, it's like, here's a calendar where we would like our mayor to speak at these 3 events this year. Like it could just be something simple like that, right? And we could even help prepare the presentation for all that matters, right? And then just get them signed up for those things. So that's about as simple as this could be. And I think it could have a big impact.
Totally. That's exactly the type of thing I was thinking. It doesn't have to be a big project. It's just someone sitting down and thinking, what are the conferences that we want our mayor to speak at? Like just a few high impact things that I'm guessing council's not even thinking about, but if they were thinking about, could be really effective.
Janelle, Commissioner London, do you have another comment, or is your hand just raised? And it's okay either way. I just don't know.
Sorry, the hand thing always flummoxes me a little bit. I don't have a brain. Okay. Sorry.
No problem. Are there other comments? And I know, Josie, go ahead.
Sorry, Rebecca, sorry, Miss Lucky had a question about action number 6, continue to advise, recommend on a climate adaptation plan. She said, Rebecca, you said in your written comments that you wanted to address the commission about that. And then also you wanted to address the commission about number 3, review and recommend advise on policies and programs to increase EV charging. You said you had updates on both of those too. So if we need to revise this with whatever you're going to give us as an update, I just want to make sure we get it all done tonight so that we can hopefully vote on this.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Gillard. And I have to say the subcommittee has done an excellent job. I mean, this was very nicely done. It was quick. They very much responded, quickly to a lot of the suggestions really provided. So to put this document before the Environmental Quality Commission is really one of the best ones I've seen. Not that all the other ones weren't as good, but this one is definitely comprehensive and does feel like you'll be able to measure your success along the way. And also, just to be fair too, these work plans haven't been around too long. I mean, we've probably done maybe 3 or 4 of them, and so they're always evolving too, and to try to get them to a better place. So really great job, Commissioner Gillard and Cabot and Elkins on this. So in response to the questions I had about so I can go with number 3 and number 6. So the EV charging for multifamily and commercial properties, and action number 6, which is climate adaptation. And the only reason I wanted to flag those, it's always tough when you're working on this work plan right when the city council is going to be considering their annual work plan as well. And so I wanted to flag those because I think for the climate adaptation action item, there could be just council priorities around that. And so that could change what work you do in this area in your work plan. But I took them off in this final version because I think it's still flexible enough to address that. So I don't really have any further comments on that one. And then number 3, it's the same. It's the same kind of notion around there's still enough flexibility in it to probably address what the council has for direction on that item. Because I did want to update the entire EQC on the council did slightly take a pivot on the EV charging for multifamily and commercial properties, because there are so many incentives out there at the state and regional level, and to try to have those be promoted rather than at this time looking at requirements in addition to building electrification. So those were just 2 very big policies to undertake in a year. And so I think the trade-off was, get building electrification finished and done and dusted, and then potentially move then on to EV charging requirements, because they do have different stakeholders and just the amount of resources needed to address both of those. So what that means, council did authorize and adopt a climate action plan that did direct staff to work on number 3. And so now that it's slightly changed, there might be different ways to approach it, and just looking at what is offered. So I don't have any further comments on those. Again, I think they're flexible enough for the subcommittees to work on that point. So thank you on that. I think the last one was, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Rebecca, if you can finish.
All right, so the last one I had was, let's see, the main one, so the green and sustainable initiatives, the only reason I wanted to flag that for the commission as well, and I know the subcommittee was having this as a placeholder, was to, this is a very big and broad topic, and I think in looking at a 2-year work plan and trying to figure out what you can accomplish in 2 years under this very broad category is ambitious. And so I don't know if there are other areas you may want to consider that are more more defined, I guess, on what the outcome is. So the first bullet point's a really great example, like develop a recommendation for pesticide posting ordinance. That's very clear, that falls under green and sustainable initiatives. I think, again, you could leave all those bullet points in, but I wasn't sure if there were other areas that the commission would be interested in. You know, we've heard a lot of conversation about leaf blowers. There's still, you know, waste management kind of issues. And I think it's probably, and again, you could kick it to the subcommittee to probably work out maybe in coming back, like what are the top 3 in the area that you'd like to work on. It is a big topic. I think this is always one that the commission is, you know, wanting to include, but sometimes it's good to have that clear sight of what you're trying to achieve at the end of the 2 years in this category. And that's all. Thank you. Thank you for all your work on this.
Thank you. Commissioner Gaylord or others, are there additional comments?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes, now we can.
Okay, sorry, I was frozen there, I think. Yeah, so we did intend this as sort of a catch-all, and we put it in long-term, if you can see on the step 5 table. So this one we wanted to be sort of, except for the first bullet, which was very specific, and it's sort of, we wanted it to be on the plan, but it's clear that we're not working on it immediately, or even we don't have a time frame of the next year 1 or year 2, that we see it as more of a long-term after we kind of have tackled the really big policy challenges on climate action. But we did want to, you know, put these out there as something that the subcommittee could, as Rebecca was saying, if members of the subcommittee had like particular things that they wanted to move forward, I think we could do that and just have it there as a catch-all for the types of things that we know as a commission we're responsible for, and that if they came up, we knew we would have to respond to. So it just sort of declares that we know that these are things that are within our domain and we will be responsive to them, and we would like to address them after we've sort of tackled the climate action, which means probably beyond the 2-year plan, but they're there in long term. That was sort of the intention.
Yes, Commissioner Cabot.
Oh, I saw Deb was ahead of me.
Oh, Deb, sorry, Commissioner Martin.
Oh, no, I mean, Tom, you could go first if you really want. No, seriously. I think, Josie, you're right. This is exactly what we had in mind for this. And I'm wondering if what you just said all there, if we just summarize that, like the first real kind of more specific bullet, because we know we've heard from the council is about looking at the pesticides, so make that very deliberate. But the other ones could be more along the spirit of, on an as needed basis, like I don't know the wording, but like just like you said, like we reckon, because there are things that are going to come up in the next 2 years that we can't anticipate now. Like when we had the drought, for instance, we had to put effort into drought resistance, and that like there was, or you know, whatever it may be, there's different topics that come up that we can't anticipate now. So I think instead of having all those bullets that make it seem like we're doing like a lot of very vague things, I think we should just be real deliberate in our bullet and say, on an as needed basis, this committee will help support efforts that come up that we can't foresee right now pertaining to health, environment, and whatever, you know, however we want to say it, but just broaden that and just make that kind of showing what the intention really is. And I think that might help.
I agree with Commissioner Martin. And that was the way I was looking at the measures in there. It was the permission to work on these as needed as they come up, and that they are part of the plan. They won't be determined to be beyond the scope of the plan. So this was permission.
I'll just jump in. On page 4 of the plan, item number 3, green and sustainability initiatives, we do say support sustainability initiatives as needs arise. So we added that language, as needs arise. So I think it's clear for someone who reads the whole document. It may not be clear on that particular page, like crystal clear on that particular page. But for someone who reads the whole plan, and I'm actually not even sure if anyone, including council members, will ever read this plan in full, but I'm hear the feedback, and I would be comfortable leaving it the way it is, just recognizing that I think it is clear in the first page of the plan that it's as needs arise. If we absolutely want to add that word, you know, or add a little sentence there, I'm happy to do that. And I'm also weighing, you know, are we polishing the apple as opposed to let's get this done and then start doing the work.
I can speak to I'm personally comfortable if we wanted to move forward with it as is. But I also appreciate there are a lot of people are making a variety of different suggestions on also some changes. And I think that that's a lot of value there as well. So where are we shaking out as a group right now? Do we feel like we want to continue to have a discussion on it, or do we want to move for a motion? Yes, Commissioner Martin. Oh, I think you're on mute.
I'm sorry, I wasn't aware that we were ready to take a motion. I had actually wanted not to change the subject on this committee, but I wanted to look at the tree one again, just since that came up so much in our comments today, public comments. I wanted to sort of just revisit that for a minute and look at the language. And I think I'm actually on that subcommittee. Is it possible that we just spend a few more, I mean,
oh yeah, of course.
Aside from finishing off the conversation we just had, I just would like us to do that before we motion anything.
Of course. I'm just temperature taking. So that is great. So let's transition, unless there's further discussion on this item, to talk about the urban canopy, to answer some of Commissioner Martin's questions.
Okay, I just wanted to pipe in. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
So I am good with the plan as it is. Just from my experience serving on the EQC, this is, you know, guidance, but it doesn't necessarily bind us, and nor does it bind, you know, that even when City Council approves it, it's not that binding. So I'm actually good with it as is, and happy to, you know, continue the discussion, but I actually have to leave right now, so I'm going to sign off. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Jenna. Oh, Commissioner London.
Take care.
So can I?
Sorry, I was just going to clarify. And she jumped off so fast. And so, I mean, yes, there's flexibility in the work plan, but I do want to remind the Environmental Quality Commission that this does provide the constraints for the commission and what they're going to work on. If you're going to start to work on things outside of the work plan, then that then needs to be put back in the work plan and approved by council. Or the other way is council directs. So I think we all had the experience with the pesticide policy of they're asking, and so we need to include it into the work plan. And so it is a document that does have a lot of weight to it and to what the commission does.
Yes, I agree that that's the case. I think the way I heard Commissioner London's comment was also that the spirit of the exact language. So we can have these conversations now, but also the spirit of the document versus the exact language. And there always might be slight change, nuances in different people's interpretation. So that's what I heard her meaning in that. I think the document itself is very comprehensive to outline everything that I would understand that EQC would want to be working on over the next 2 years. I think that Commissioner Martin is right to return the conversation to the urban canopy preservation, given Christian's comments and just the amount of comment we get from the public on urban canopy. Yes, Josie, or Commissioner Gaylord, sorry.
Yes, so on page, it's sort of split oddly in a weird way between pages 10 and 11 of the document. In the fourth column, you'll see under urban canopy preservation, we have a bullet point in year 2. We can change where this is, and the tree subcommittee could want to swap these maybe. We do have research ways for cities, other cities measure health of the urban forest and make a recommendation to council. You know, that would potentially, you know, the step there could be recommend tree master plan, urban canopy master plan. So, but I think that would be up to the subcommittee. But I'm, again, I would leave it there and let the subcommittee decide. Deb, if you're part of the subcommittee, I think the subcommittee could say, we want to recommend that the council do a urban canopy master plan and that it be done in this year and that it be resourced in this way. We didn't decide that sort of for the subcommittee, I guess.
Yes, Commissioner Martin.
Yeah, so I guess I think what I heard is that, and I might have missed part of this, but I think what I heard is that the master plan is something that that the arborist has tried to do in the past, but they don't have funding for it right now, as I understood. And I'm trying to square out how we're recommending something here that we know isn't kind of supported right now. So I'm just kind of trying to think through this. I don't really have a clear recommendation right now, but I always get a little hesitant to recommend, and maybe I'm not understanding this constraints here, but for us to be putting down that we're trying to help with a comprehensive urban canopy strategy when we know that that's, and I guess it's a 2-year plan, so this can be aspirational, but I'm just trying to kind of understand how we're able to do that if we know that that's not something that's resourced or prioritized right now. I don't know, Rebecca, if you have comments for that.
So I could make a suggestion. I mean, we've got a good example from the Heritage Tree Ordinance update that definitely came from the Environmental Quality Commission as a recommendation to council to put on their work plan. I think it was also a capital improvement project as well. And so I think what could be is you could recommend or find a pathway to informing the council on this topic and a recommendation. I don't know if you really need to come up with the budget and all the staff resources. I think if the council takes that recommendation from the Environmental Quality Commission, then it's staff that would really look as to how much resources would be needed and how does that fit into all the priorities that the council is seeking to accomplish in a year. And as you know, Deb, because you've been on the commission for so long, the Heritage Tree Ordinance was on their work plan for quite some time, but it did, at some point in the future, it did get taken up and it was worked on full throttle at that point. So that's one way of
so you feel, so Rebecca, you feel in light of the conversation, I have kind of a couple things, but in light of the conversation, are we okay with the wording of this?
So if you're seeking a possible way to look at the develop an urban tree master plan, I wrote that down as a note here, then I think you would probably want to add that as a bullet point. I mean, because receiving an update on the Heritage Tree Ordinance, that's different than coming up with an urban forest master plan. Oh, wait, it says here, sorry, research ways other cities measure health of urban forest. And make it present. Yeah, I think that's,
I don't have enough.
It's within there.
So I'm on this committee, but I don't want to rat hole this right now. I don't even have an idea of how readily available this type of information is on how other cities are implementing a comprehensive urban canopy strategy, or what's been done already a little bit through Christian to understand where that's at. So maybe I'm just not quite sure. And I'm the other caveat is that I'm sadly have 3 more meetings with you all. So I probably won't be contributing a ton on this. I have 3 more months of work that I can do. So how best put me to work on that. One thing I did want to say though, that I think we need somehow what we heard today, just actually as Scott Marshall reminded me of, is that there was a lot of, like in that one case, right? I'm just saying, like, we know that trees are important to our residents, right? And this is a case where at one point there was a lot of action tapped in there, like the EQC was participating in that, many residents were, and that helped to influence other mitigation strategies. And I was glad he reminded us of that, because there there was other mitigations done to not have to have that expansion. So how do we get more involved when we know there's going to be this type of thing, that we at least at a minimum understand it and can relay, you know, do a little bit more of an active engagement. It's the same with the sort of situation that, you know, with the overpass. Like, these are really important things to our citizens. So I'm just wondering how we can articulate a point that when these things come up, that our committee should be somehow a little more tapped in, a little bit more leadership, a little bit more guiding, even if it's for, you know, we might not have all the answers, we might not be able to influence it, but I think we need more active participation in those types of things. So I don't know how to word that, but that's just, I feel like we need to bring that forward into this plan.
Yeah, so I would suggest, I mean, you know, maybe it's looking at the long-term health of the urban forest. And again, similar to when there was a subcommittee of the EQC looking at the heritage tree ordinance and its implementation, it would be broader than that. It would not only be the heritage tree ordinance that, you know, the long-term health of the urban forest could look at, it would also be engagement of the community. It could, you know, and ways to improve that, as well as, you know, developing an urban tree master plan. And so I guess you could, so probably is it the second year bullet point could be further enhanced by just really addressing recommendations to develop a long-term urban forest management plan. And then the subcommittee could potentially give like the nuts and bolts of what that could mean, or what's that look like, to help guide staff or the city council to understand what would the next step be on that. And you could talk to, I mean, we have a lot of very, you know, passionate community members around this too. And so that subcommittee could talk to those members as well and get, you know, input on a final recommendation to city council on that front.
Okay, so I'm recognizing the time, and I just, so I'm going to suggest that to the bullet point, maybe Rebecca, you can kind of put your cursor over it. The year 2 bullet point under urban canopy preservation, that this read, research ways other cities measure health of urban forest and make a recommendation to council on developing a long-term urban forest management plan. Deb, do you feel like that covers it, or you want something more specific related to, and I don't know what it is, but like get more involved in JPAs related to trees, or?
I mean, I just think that I don't quite know how to say this because it's kind of on the spot, and I'm just responding to everything I've heard today. I think that this is like, with this looks like we're actively researching measures that other cities are taking. And I'm just wondering, how do we incorporate some verbiage around when there are big efforts that involve a lot of trees coming down, whether it's PG&E around the power line or whatever, that we need to at least be engaged in that, have a formal way to engage in that process, to understand it, to maybe we need to, you know, be that sort of conduit with the project leaders or whatever, and the public, to understand, you know, what the implications are, what kind of ways we can influence it. So, and this happens sort of, this happens all the time. I mean, it's happened at least every year that I've been on the committee. There's been some, whether it's PG&E, whether it's the, you know, whatever, some big public utility project, right? Where it really does get the citizens quite concerned, and we don't really have the best like way of addressing that. It's sort of, so I don't know whether that we could have a bullet that says actively engage a commission, a member of this committee on any large scale city tree removal coming from whatever avenue. I don't know, you know, I don't know the right wording, but I think we need to make it seem like there's a way that we're reacting to issues that come up in the city at any given time, rather than just looking at seeing what other cities are doing. I don't think it's hitting the point the way this is written right now. It's not hitting the point of addressing those types of things, and they happen frequently enough that I think we need to get it in there somehow. Does that make sense?
Okay. How about,
So I was just going to add one thing. I think what I noticed as well in some of the comments, and to Deb's point, is that people were asking us not necessarily look to other cities for leadership, but instead to look at our city holistically. And so because we only consider the trees individually, when these larger projects come up, and as Judy and other public commenters mentioned, it seems like we are losing more trees than we're planting. And that's not necessarily our goal. So what I've heard from our community is instead of it, as Deb is suggesting, instead of saying research other ways cities measure the health, Christian kind of clearly said a master plan is a missing piece in our strategy for the urban canopy. And so implementing a master plan for the urban canopy. And this could be a separate bullet, but perhaps we need to be clear in stating that the master plan is what's missing from Menlo Park's strategy for the urban canopy.
Okay, so what I hear you saying, Ryan, is because we wouldn't put in our work plan implement an urban forest master plan. We would say recommend to council.
Recommend adoption of an urban canopy master plan.
Okay, recommend adoption of an urban canopy master plan. Okay, so I could then remove that bullet and replace it with that. And then to address Deb's concern, which seems different, I wrote down represent citizen concerns regarding trees in large scale tree
projects or large scale, because it's
in projects
Tree removal
involving
projects.
Yeah.
Large scale tree removal projects.
And I
you.
would say too, well, and maybe this is getting too specific, but sometimes people come to us just when they see large scale pruning. We've had that happen too. So it's like anything that's kind of touching a large number of trees, or where large numbers of trees are being discussed, seems to be something that people want to talk about.
Okay, so I'm going to put forward the plan as is with these two changes. Instead of the one bullet point there, we have 2 bullet points, and they read like this. Recommend adoption of an urban forest master plan. Bullet number 2 would be represent citizen concerns regarding large scale tree removal projects and pruning.
Oh,
I just wanted to, I see Rebecca. I just wanted to clarify quickly. I don't think pruning should be involved, number one, because that happens all the time, and that is not the same as a tree removal. And I think the city should respond to pruning issues. But the reason I'm bringing this particular issue up is because the 3 most largest tree removals that I can think of that really cause concern, they were out of the city's kind of jurisdiction. So we didn't almost like really have I don't want to say we didn't kind of have a choice. We couldn't develop a master plan to address it. It was sort of we had to raise enough of a stink to get a little bit more of a middle ground of what we wanted. So those are the types of scenarios that I think really put us at a limited, there really can be a lot that can be done when the citizens and when we are involved in the process in a way that we're bringing forward so you're hitting it, Josie. I just want to distinguish that it's really these things that come up that are not part of the city plan. It's just beyond our control to some degree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I don't know that it needs to be written in here though.
No, yeah, but that's just to specify what I'm talking about and distinguish it from a city controlled type of thing.
Right.
So yeah, I think you got it. I think it's good.
Okay, so it's represent citizen concerns regarding large scale tree removal projects or tree removal and pruning projects. Ryan, are you okay removing pruning, or do you want to advocate strongly we keep it?
The only reason I brought it up is because we've had people come and complain that developers or somebody prunes a tree enough that the tree will then die and that it has to be removed. So it's like a strategy somebody uses but it's totally fine to not have it. But I also know Rebecca was trying to chime in about something.
Yes, thank you, Chair Price. So, I hear what you're saying about the second bullet point, but I also think there are some constraints about the commission representing, being a representative on large tree removals, just because you're an appeal body as well. So if something gets appealed and you're a representative, I think that could get very unclear as to the role of the EQC in that regard. And so I think what could be done is, taking stock, taking its assessment observations by, hearing and seeing what's going on with these large tree removals and keeping tabs on them, similar to what some of our community members already do on that level. And when tree removals are before planning commission or city council or in other areas, and then to kind of form recommendations based on those observations, or your kind of take on how those processes went and how they could be improved.
Okay, I'm going to make a revised, that's good, revised second bullet. Track and make recommendations regarding citizen concerns about large-scale tree removal projects.
We also have Commissioner Elkins and Commissioner Cabot who had their hands raised.
I unraised my hand. I was just going to suggest the word monitor, but when you track and the way that you just stated it, Josie, sounds good.
Tom?
I was going to bring up the Willow Road overpass landscaping plan that was brought to us. Seemed like an interesting case, and maybe, I hope it's not going to be repeated with the Pope Chaucer Bridge project, because by the time they brought anything to us, they had finished designing it and eliminated all flexibility. It's what it sounded like to me. And so there wasn't a chance to interact with it. And so what I was hearing in the public comments today about the possibility of massive public works projects was the public wanted a chance to interact about the trees, the effects on trees in those large projects, and wanted a venue to do it, and was looking at us as a venue to see the plans that impact trees at an early enough stage to focus on how might the plans be adjusted to preserve tree values.
Okay. Sorry if it feels rushed, but I'm ready to get to dinner. I have 2 bullets, and is everyone okay with the rewording on the second bullet? Track and make recommendations regarding citizen concerns on large-scale tree removal projects. Everyone good with that?
Yes.
Yes. Yes. Okay. And then I'm going to recommend that one either be moved, and I want to hear from the subcommittee members, either be moved to the urgent column or the long-term column. I want to hear what you think. That one. I think that the urban forest master plan is going to stay under year 2.
I would move the comments and tracking to urgent. I'm not on the subcommittee actually. So, but that would, I feel like that's something that we do ad hoc. And if we could make it something that we say we do in a routines way, I think that would speak to a lot of the comments that we get and is probably a good use of our time.
Okay. So I will move that to urgent unless I see objections from anyone.
No, I'm good with that.
Okay. All right. So we have 2 new bullets. One is going in urgent. One is going in, going to remain in year 2. And I've read them several times. So I would like to move that we pass the plan as with the 2 amendments I made.
I would second it. And to vote, we have to do a roll call vote. That'll be called by Miss Lucky, I believe.
Thank you, Commissioner Gellard and Price. So the motion is to adopt the 2-year EQC work plan with revisions to the urban canopy preservation task item to be made by Commissioner Gillard. And it was motioned by Gillard and seconded by Price. I will call roll call. Commissioner Gillard?
Yes.
Commissioner Elkins?
Yes.
Commissioner Price?
Yes.
Commissioner Cabot?
Yes.
Commissioner Martin?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great job.
And the next item on our agenda is, and I also need to leave. I have a new baby that I need to go deal with, not deal with, I don't mean to make that sound negative, but address. So we have the review and discussion of the ad hoc subcommittees to implement the Environmental Quality Commission's 2-year work plan. And so we have that item. If we think that item is something we can get through in the next like 4 or 5 minutes, then I think we can cover it. Otherwise, I think we would need to move it to the next meeting perhaps. So do we think we can get through it in 4 or 5 minutes?
I don't actually know what it is, Rebecca. If it's just
Sure.
that Ryan, you're joining one and Deb's joining another, which happened in between meetings. That's it. But Rebecca may have more.
Yeah, so I've had Commissioner London, she did let me know that she couldn't be a part of some of the subcommittees due to her other work. So there was quite a bit of moving around after the fact. So I just wanted to make it clear again on the agenda who's part of which subcommittee.
Okay.
So I think it can be done.
I think it can be done too. So let's go for it and see. And if we can't, then we will call it. Do we have any public comment on this item?
Thank you, Chair Price. So if there are any members attending, if you'd like to make a public comment, you can do so at this time. You can use the raise the hand feature next to your name on the attendees list, and I will be able to unmute your microphone so that you can speak up to 3 minutes on this agenda item. And with that, I do not see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. So we can go to the item at hand. So Rebecca is correct. My understanding is that Commissioner London is not available to be on the subcommittees, and that we wanted to just look at them to make sure that people were in the correct places, since I was not able to confirm live that where I would be. And I think it sounds like that may have been the case for Commissioner Martin as well. So in looking at that, it looks like we have only Commissioner Payne perhaps currently on the decarbonization subcommittee.
Transportation decarbonization.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I've left the word out. Thank you. Transportation decarbonization subcommittee. And if we scroll down, I believe that was the only location where there would be left with one person. So I think that's the question on the table. And then for Commissioner Martin, do you see yourself reflected where you had intended to be on commission or on subcommittees?
I don't know that I reported this to Rebecca, so it may not be on here. Sorry about that, Deb. Deb expressed interest in trees and sustainable initiatives subcommittee.
Yeah, my rationale here was that, we have a lot of effort and attention on climate change. And so I only have 3 months left, and wherever I can make input on other priorities that we have I wasn't even sure if we had commissioners on these other ones. It looks like we do. So that was kind of my rationale. I feel like we're heavily kind of wanting to really tackle the climate change as the first more urgent priority. And that's why I just don't feel like putting me on those would be very valuable at this time, unless other folks feel otherwise. But I'm open. I mean, I can help where needed. You got me for 3 months, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Martin.
Wherever you want to put me. I hate to say it, but wherever you need me, just put me there. I'll do my best.
I think that sounds good, Deb. I think it's perfect, actually. The only other question I wanted to ask was, does anyone want to join Commissioner Payne on the transportation decarbonization, or join me and Commissioner Cabot on the climate outreach subcommittee? I'm not pushing for either of those. I just wanted to open up the opportunity in case, since we have some openings there, someone really wanted to do it. If not, I think we're done.
I'm happy where I am.
We can also remember that once Deb rolls off, there will be another commissioner coming on who might want to join those.
So if everybody is comfortable here, do we have a motion to approve this as the revised subcommittees for the work plan?
So moved.
I was going to make a motion, but it sounds like Tom did. I second.
Okay, it's seconded. And we can vote via roll call as Ms. Lucky calls us.
Thank you, Chair Price. So the motion is to remove Commissioner London from the subcommittees and to add Commissioner Martin to the Trees and Sustainable Initiatives Subcommittee.
Yep.
And that was a motion by Commissioner
Cabot
and seconded by Martin. Commissioner Martin.
Correct.
Okay. Commissioner Gillard, how do you vote?
Yes.
Commissioner Elkins.
Yes.
Commissioner Price.
Yes.
Commissioner Cabot.
Yes.
Commissioner Martin.
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you. And we are now, this concludes the regular business section of the agenda. The remaining item are any reports from any of the staff or other commission members. Does anybody have any reports that we haven't covered in the meeting?
So I do.
Oh, yes, go ahead. Sorry, I can't see everybody at once.
So as I mentioned earlier, sorry. Oh, actually I should have stopped sharing. That way you can see everybody. How's that better?
Thank you.
Okay. So as I mentioned in earlier agenda items, the City Council will be looking at their annual work plan. Right now that is scheduled to take place on Saturday, January 30th, starting at 10 a.m. That's tentative, so don't take my word for it, but that's what's on the calendar right now. So from about 10 to 12, there'll be public comment, and then there'll be a break. And then after that, the council will discuss their work plan priorities. So I think that'll be a great kind of area for the EQC members, those who can attend, just to see.
Sorry, what was the date again?
Sorry, January 30th, Saturday. Hopefully it'll just be raining that day. So that.
And what time?
I believe it's going to start at 10 a.m. That's for public comment. And so the agenda should be released that week or the week prior to, which will have a staff report with recommendations based on the council feedback over the last year of what they'd like to work on. I don't anticipate that they're going to get through all of it that Saturday, so there will probably be additional meetings as a result of it, but that's usually the kickoff to start the conversation and discussion. And as if you don't already know, we've transitioned mayors, so we've now have Mayor Combs, and the vice mayor is Betsy Nash.
Thank you. Are there any other updates? Or sorry, reports? Okay, well, then we can adjourn our meeting at 8:04 p.m. Thank you, everybody. And it was nice to be back. So thank you for having me back. And we'll see you guys all in February.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a good night.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.